NBC's cancellation of Grosse Pointe Garden Society continues a troubling pattern of network decisions that may get worse before it gets better. The Grosse Pointe Garden Society Season 1 finale didn't end on a particularly major cliffhanger, but it felt like the first chapter in a longer narrative. It rendered Grosse Pointe Garden Society Season 2 a thrilling storytelling prospect. But how this tale of murder, intrigue, and infidelity in upper-class Michigan might have continued will have to remain a mystery thanks to Grosse Pointe Garden Society's cancellation. NBC's decision to pull the series wasn't entirely surprising in light of middling ratings and only slightly above-average reviews, but it speaks to a larger issue in context of the network's other cancellations. Grosse Pointe Garden Society is NBC's final cancellation from the 2024 to 2025 TV cycle. NBC cancelled 6 shows altogether in one season. After the network announced 5 cancellations in May, fans of NBC's Grosse Pointe Garden Society might have felt a tinge of hope upon seeing the drama's absence from the list. However, Suits La's cancellation should have been a sign of ill portent, since Suits La's ratings were slightly higher than those of Grosse Pointe Garden Society. This also might have been telling when considering where each show was at in its run. On top of the fact that Grosse Pointe Garden Society had the lowest ratings of all NBC series cancelled in 2025, Suits La's second lowest ratings couldn't save it from becoming the only show besides Grosse Pointe to be cancelled after only one season that NBC's other cancelled series had time to earn their renewal. Found and The Irrational were both cancelled after 2 seasons, while Night Court and Lopez vs. Lopez got 3. And, despite all but Lopez vs. Lopez facing declining viewership, they clearly thought they'd be renewed since nearly every cancelled NBC series ended on a cliffhanger or major status quo change. Each of these series endings spelled promise for their future storylines, even if it remained somewhat risky for the network to gamble on these status quo shifts, leading to a rise in viewership. Although it seemed every series ending could have led to the next season being its best yet, Grosse Pointe Garden Society's cancellation felt particularly disappointing. Why Grosse Pointe Garden Society's cancellation is frustrating. The show's tone and story were uniquely fresh. The main cast in Grosse Pointe Garden Society. Despite numerous understandable comparisons to Desperate Housewives when it was first announced, Grosse Pointe Garden Society's unique premise helped the series establish its own identity from the very first episode. The show's nearly season-long murder mystery and timeline-hopping structure kept each episode compelling, and clever hints such as naming the body Quiche landed brilliantly when the victim's identity was revealed. Even the episode's narration, a storytelling technique that can come across as trite and overdone if executed poorly, contributed to the series' fresh take on the genre. Grosse Pointe Garden Society embraced its concept with intricately crafted analogies between life and the art of gardening, giving each episode an individual theme within the broader construct of the narrative. Rather than gradually losing impact, these aspects of the show actually improved over time, and it seems plausible that Grosse Pointe Garden Society's uniqueness likely contributed to its delayed cancellation, even despite its struggles to ascend from the bottom of the ratings. With its quality execution and enthralling performances, saving Garden Society from the scrap pile shouldn't have been unachievable. In fact, NBC demonstrated one method of saving Grosse Pointe with their approach to Law and Order, Organized Crime Season 5. With its binge-friendly story structure, Grosse Pointe Garden Society might have thrived by moving to Peacock and removing itself from the weekly ratings game. Sadly, it wasn't the only series with a singular premise denied that particular life raft. NBC's cancelled several unique shows in 2025. Found and The Irrational were only getting better. While Grosse Pointe Garden Society stood out as perhaps the only scripted NBC series that wasn't a sitcom or procedural, several cancelled series under those umbrellas had their own unique premises. Lopez vs. Lopez was one of the few minority sitcoms on network TV, and found spotlighted overlooked groups of people from all walks of life. Meanwhile, The Irrational treated each episode almost like a short film with a unique focus not often seen in current network procedurals, such as Close-Up Magic or Community Theater, the latter of which delightfully played on Jesse L. Martin's renowned Broadway career. Furthermore, both the Irrational series finale and Found series finale promised to ramp up each series' dramatic storylines. The issue is compounded when looking at what NBC chose to renew. The Hunting Party Season 2 renewal is great news on its own, especially after it premiered with 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. However, aside from its focus on serial killers, The Hunting Party does little outside its conspiracy storyline to differentiate its tone from that of other procedurals. Similarly, while Brilliant Minds uniquely draws from real-world medical cases, its tone and focus on neurodivergence feel highly reminiscent of The Good Doctor. NBC's remaining 2025 fall schedule consists of 2 sitcoms and 5 Dick Wolf procedurals, a programming block not unlike that of any other major network. Interestingly, NBC's new NBA deal might only make things worse. NBA's arrival on NBC shouldn't deter the network from doing good scripted shows. The network's latest sports deal could signal a risky change of focus. Michael Jordan playing basketball looking out into the crowd. More than 20 years after the network lost its contract to ABC, the NBA is returning to NBC for the 2025 to 2026 season. NBC signed an 11-year media rights contract with the association and tapped Michael Jordan as a special contributor, both of which suggest the network's new sports deal is high on its list of priorities. This isn't uncommon. Sports are generally perceived as generating more revenue than scripted programming that might only cater to a specific slice of the population. A similar mentality often drives networks to preserve familiar programming over boundary-pushing content. Although St. Denis Medical brings a lot to the mockumentary format, the genre itself plays no small role in bringing in viewers. Even so, with mainstream sports ratings dropping as of late, it's potentially riskier now to shove aside fresh, quality programming in favor of a sports-focused schedule. On the other side of the coin, viewers tuning in to watch NBA on NBC and Peacock might be less inclined to change channels when coverage leads into a series with a compelling hook. In short, focusing on new shows with fresh angles could prove to be a lucrative long-term game plan regardless of how many viewers basketball brings in on its own. Grosse Pointe Garden Society was an unfortunate casualty of traditional network trends, but it's not too late for NBC to reassess whether those trends are truly doing them any favors.